What's up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of Our Travel Tips. Today I'm talking about culture shock, and this is going to be a two-part series here. Because I will talk about reverse culture shock in a second episode to this, but today we'll talk about culture shock. Now, this is something that you might have heard about, something that might frighten you if you're traveling abroad for the first time. It can be a big issue when it comes to travel, especially if we're traveling for the first time, especially overseas, or we're traveling to some place that's vastly different than the culture or type of life that we're used to. So it is a big problem, and it's something that we can combat. So now having traveled to a lot of countries around the world, a lot of different types of countries and cultures, I can say that yes, culture shock is definitely real. Yes, it is a negative thing that can negatively impact your trip, but it does get easier over time to deal with. It does get better, once you know what to expect, and in the grand scheme of things, it's really not that bad, and it's a part of the journey, a part of the trip. And so I think it's really important to embrace it as something that is making us uncomfortable and taking us out of our comfort zone, which is going to lead us to be better than we were before we traveled, and it's going to help us grow as people too. I can speak from my experience, having again traveled to a lot of different places and a lot of different cultures. Being in that uncomfortable situation where I don't know the language, I don't know the foods, I don't know the culture, I don't know anything about this place that I'm in. Being in those situations has really helped me grow in my own personal life when I'm back home. It's helped me to feel less uncomfortable in potentially uncomfortable situations. It helps me to just understand that things aren't always going to be perfect. I'm not always going to necessarily fit in 100% into any one situation, but you just got to kind of roll with it and take it for what it is and see it as a growing opportunity. So it's really helped shift my mindset over the years by putting myself in these positions. So one, I would say it's good to put yourself in that position where culture shock is an issue, or can be an issue. It's good to take yourself outside of your comfort zone, and I think that's what travel does, especially traveling abroad. It's going to put you into those uncomfortable situations, which is going to help you grow as a person, which is always good. But two, it's nice to know, and part of why I'm doing this video is it's nice to know beforehand that this is a thing, that it probably will happen at some point, and that you'll get through it. So when we first go abroad, we're gonna feel all those emotions of excitement, or even just to a more domestic location. This can still be a thing as well, but I'll just speak from an international perspective. So going abroad can be very exciting. I know it's always exciting for me. I'm always very hyped up with emotions when I first start my trip, and so I make it over there. The first day or two of the trip is really good. I'm really enjoying it. I'm enjoying being in this new place, experiencing all these new things. And then usually it's around day 2 or 3 where you kind of settled in a little bit. You're used to wherever you're at. The adrenaline is worn off a little bit, and you take this big dip, this big dive in your energy level and your emotions, and you can feel pretty negative, feel pretty depressed, anxiety, all these sorts of things, and that's where culture shock comes in. So culture shock, essentially, what it is it's when you go to a new place, it's feeling that shock of being outside of your normal life, outside of your normal foods, language, culture, whatever it is. It's putting you into the spot where all of a sudden your brain can't go on autopilot throughout the day. It has to actively work all the time to figure out where you're at, what's going on, what are the foods, what are the smells. You got all these new senses that you're experiencing, And so it just kind of assaults your senses and your body, your mind, and makes you feel potentially really negative, really down on yourself. You might feel homesick when you go abroad and when you're feeling this culture shock, and it's going to happen at some point. Every trip that I've been on, it has happened at some point where I'm like, oh geez, this is not this is not the way I want to feel. I feel really out of place. I feel really uncomfortable. Maybe this isn't where I should be. But that's where some of the tips come in. So once you're there, this culture shock is going to happen at some point. It's day 2 or 3 of the trip, maybe even a little bit longer into the trip, and you start feeling this culture shock. What do? Well, the best thing that I like to do is to go immerse myself in the culture, go experience the foods, go enjoy some activities, and take my mind off of how I'm feeling a little bit. So whether that's going to the beach, whether that's going to a nice restaurant, whether that's going to a museum, whatever it is, whatever you want to do, doing some sort of activity to keep you occupied throughout the day, that always really helps me. It gives me something to focus on, gives me a task to think about and work towards, rather than just focusing on how I'm feeling all the time. So it's kind of a nice distraction, and that can help you through that period of time where you're feeling this shock. I think some other great things to do are, one, you can call home or FaceTime or whatever it is, talk to people back home, and just kind of get reconnected with your home life, with what you're used to, your routine, in some sort of way. That can really be helpful as well, just to hear a familiar voice or see a familiar face, or talk to someone that especially if you're traveling alone. That can be a big thing. So that's important there. And then the other tip would be to go find other travelers, find other locals, and just ask them to share more about their travels. Maybe you go travel together that day, or for a couple days, or for a longer time. Maybe someone local, takes you out to the bar or something at night, or gives you a lot of good advice, kind of helps you ease your way into where you're at, into your destination. So I always try to do that. I try to connect with some of the locals, whether it's at a bar or restaurant, talking to the bartender or waiter, waitress, that can be really helpful. It's easy to meet other travelers in hostels, or maybe in some kind of public space where travelers might be. But it's nice to have that community to kind of make a friend and share some of these crazy experiences with, and kind of work through some of your emotions with someone else there. And this can be easier with, if you're actually traveling with someone else, that can be really helpful to just kind of talk through some of those emotions with the person you're traveling with as well. So those are some tips to combat culture shock. It is a thing, it's going to happen, but the longer you're staying in one destination, the less and less of that you're going to feel typically. Typically, there's a big spike of positive emotions and excitement and adrenaline when you're first starting your trip. And then, like I said, you take a big dip, usually a day or two, sometimes 3 days into the trip. The excitement kind of wears off a little bit. And then, like I said, if you're experiencing things, if you're keeping yourself engaged, you're going to come back up. You're going to feel some positive emotions, and then slowly, you're gonna ride the waves a little bit there. But over time, it'll even out, and it'll be more normal for you. It'll be similar to your normal life, and that shock will wear off on you. So get out there, go travel, make some connections with people. If you need someone to talk to when you're traveling, definitely reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk with you and share some of those experiences with you. But just know it's going to happen. Culture shock is a thing when it comes to travel. It can throw you off, but if you know it's going to happen and you embrace it as part of the journey, you'll be fine. So Get out there and travel, guys, and stay tuned for the next part of this, which will be reverse culture shock. And I'll see you all around the world soon.